boy, if they don't pump you up, I don't know what will. Wayne, what's going on, man?
What's up, buddy? Every time I hear that, I feel like we need to step our game up 10 times, you know?
I've already done brawling it for tonight, man. I'm ready to go. I see people piling into the chat. That's an awesome thing to see. But we got our first guests here. First, we started with immediate family. We're going to bring the cousins into the dinner table here in a minute. But Tiffany, what's going on with you? I'm glad to have you here tonight.
I am ecstatic to be here. I've been like vibrating, just waiting for this show tonight.
Oh my God, there's so many places I could go with that, but I'm not going to go there because I've been in trouble. Let's just transition right into bringing our first guest ever on that Bigfoot podcast. We have our friends and family from the Basement Hangout, Bob and Chad. What's going on, guys?
How you doing, guys? Very pleased to be here this evening.
Yeah, I've been vibrating as well.
We are both vibrating over here.
Yeah, just happy to be
There's
here.
3 of us vibrating this evening.
I'm glad your mics have mute buttons for all the vibration that's going on in the room. I'm glad to have you guys. It's been a while since we've got to do anything together. So you guys joined the family a while back, and I am so glad and so thankful that we haven't really seen you guys since we hung out up in the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference back in July. So it's good to have you guys here. We're going to get into all kinds of stuff tonight. Talk about some Bigfoot and UFOs. Man, I'm going to tell you, I could go on forever about some of the people I've talked to just over the last couple of days that have had some weird, really weird experiences with Bigfoot and possibly some of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to go down and say a couple of hellos in the chat. Charlotte J's been in there for a while. What's up? Thank you so much for being here. Troy, thank you for being here. Mike Smith, what's up, man? There's John. He's all ears. We're going to play a little clip from John here shortly when we get into the show. Ristel, what's going on? Glad to have you here. There's Jake from 1621 Studios. What's up? Hey, Ash, foraging with Bigfoot. I'm so glad to see you here. She gave us a big whoop. I got to hang out with Ashley when I was up in the Radium Expedition with her and Todd and Kyle and Richard last month. Had a blast with her. She is an awesome, awesome lady. Just glad to have you all here, and we want you to be a part of the show. Obviously, we want you to be in the chat. We want you to talk to us in the chat. That's the first way you can communicate with us. But we do have a new function that we want you guys to take advantage of when we tell you to do so today. So we have a phone number where you can call us and be a part of the show. If you want to call in, don't do it now because even though it says call in now, I'm just showing you the number. 828-394-9191 is the number. If you want to be a part of the show when we let this tick across the bottom when we get to that point, we'd love to have you guys call in if you have a question for anybody, whether it's me, Chad, Bob, Tiffany, Wayne, whoever, or it's about the subject matter you just want to add to the show. We'd love to hear from you guys. We'd love to have you interact. So jot down the number now. We'll do this again when it's time after we get into the show. So 828-394-9191. You guys be good in the chat tonight. We do have Tiff taking care of business. So if you get crazy in the chat, she's going to kick your ass out. So don't do that. Steve is in the house from Ontario. What's up, man? We've been emailing back and forth. Good to see you here. John from Australia. Welcome in, man. We're glad to have you from across the pond. And Naoma. Hey, Naoma. Sorry I haven't emailed you back. I'm a bad boy. I haven't forgotten about you. So let's get into it. Let's talk about this Bigfoot and UFO thing. I was eating some dinner after an interview that I had that went 3 hours today. And I decided to take a little break and eat some dinner. And while eating my dinner, I put on a documentary that was from a couple of years ago called The Bigfoot Alien Connection, right? I watched that on, I don't know what streaming platform it was. Interesting stuff because there's a ton of that goes on. I know we've all had Bigfoot encounters that we've talked to people that have had weird stuff go on. I used to separate that stuff all the time and say, yeah, you saw lights and crazy stuff in the sky, but it doesn't have anything to do with Bigfoot, right? Because people will say, I saw orbs, I saw this, I saw that, and then I saw a Bigfoot. And I used to say those things are mutually exclusive, doesn't have anything to do with the other. Let me go around the horn, and before we get into some of the things we're going to talk about, I'm going to play a couple of clips from, like I said, from John, and I'm going to play a clip from Stan Gordon. I had him on the show a couple of years ago. And Stan is a pretty well-known UFO and Bigfoot researcher out in Pennsylvania. And we talked about that extensively, about that possible connection. But let me start with you, Wayne. Does anything stick out that you've documented over the years that was really weird that pointed to a possible connection between Bigfoot and alien?
Brian, in preparation to the show, I reached back in the memory bank and I remember talking to a lady It was about 8 months ago. Dr. Linda Thompson. Yeah, Lisa Thompson, I'm sorry. She is a big UFO person. She lives in Hawaii. She does UFO tours out there. Very educated, well spoken, just an awesome lady. I've had her on a couple of times. She actually went over, she told me what planet Bigfoots are from, why they're here, how they got here, and all that stuff. And instead of playing the clip, I wrote down a few things. When we get to it later to start, after you play your clip and everything, I'll share what she told me. But it's really interesting what she had to say.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I can't wait to hear it. Chad, Bob, what about you guys? This was your wheelhouse. I left it up to you what we talked about tonight, and this was your suggestion. So let's talk about why you suggested it and what you have uncovered in your travels when dealing with people and interviewing folks about UFOs and Bigfoot.
So we've been big into the whole UFO subject and trying to figure out if we're in the midst of disclosure and this and that. In the past, we've been into the Bigfoot issue as well. And a lot of what we heard, as you mentioned, involved people seeing orbs in the woods, either just prior to or just after seeing a Bigfoot. And all the stuff that we've seen recently with Skinwalker Ranch and all that kind of stuff, where there's seems to be this connection between poltergeist activity, Bigfoot activity, dogman activity, UFOs, the possibility of all that basically being one phenomenon that is somehow connected. I know that there's this push and pull between the sort of nuts and bolts community in the Bigfoot world. It's a hominin, this and that versus the woo. I'm not sure that we've come to a conclusion on it yet, but that's why it's super interesting to us, Bob.
Yeah, we love diving into it. So I've never heard that Bigfoot may be from another planet. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, that is an interesting.
I've heard dimension. I've heard the sightings of the orbs, but we love all paranormal. So we dive into everything. But hopefully tonight we can come to a conclusion.
Gotcha. And I'm going to play the first clip I'm going to play here in a second after we hear from Tiff is the clip from John. And that's one of the things that John has a theory on how this is connected. And I think it will all come together as we go along. And I'll play that from him. What about you, Tiffany? You've done a lot of research into Dogman and I'm sure looked into UFOs and you've done a ton of shows already with Wayne and looked into this subject. Is there anything that stuck out to you as far as a possible Bigfoot alien connection with some of the stories that you've heard?
It really hasn't. And I can tell you from my own personal experience here at my house, when my husband had his sighting, less than a second, we were also having paranormal activity going on at our house at the same time. The paranormal activity here recently has amped up. I'm really being observant of the outside surroundings of our house, any new rocks that may be hanging around. But I can attest for sure that here, at least on this side of the mountain, if there's a Bigfoot, there's paranormal.
That's interesting. I'm going to go ahead and get into the clips and then we'll go back around the horn and let Wayne talk about his story. And then we'll get into some of the stuff that we're about to hear. But this first clip I'm going to play, like I said, is from John. John is he's a longtime investigator. He's been doing this for decades, looking into these subjects. And he talks a little bit about, he's had Bigfoot experiences and he's had UFO experiences. And he's going to talk a little bit about here some of the people that he has interviewed over the years that have not just had those experiences in and of themselves, but sometimes together. So here's a short clip from John, and then I'll play the one from Stan after that, and then we can talk about them both.
The more I looked into the UFO field and the Bigfoot field, I started finding correlations between the two where people had actually seen Bigfoot coming in and out of landed craft, which really threw me off. Up in a tree, this is about 7 in the evening in the summer, and all of a sudden, I look down and I see two large green eyes looking back at me through the foliage. The next thing I know, I'm getting pelted with fist-sized boulders. I scurried down a tree as fast as I could to see what was doing it. When I got down there, it was gone. Moved that fast. So as I started walking out of the woods, my co-investigator called me on the walkie-talkie. He said he was getting pelted with rocks, boulder size as well. Devin was about 80 feet away or so, and he saw a 7-foot plus Bigfoot following me out of the woods. As soon as it turned and saw him move toward it, took off and ran. We got footprints and such. It was about 17 inches long, about 1.5 inches deep, which it would indicate a creature about maybe 500 to 600 pounds. We stayed on that case about a year, no resolution, no other sightings at that point. But what I saw in those eyes, Brian, was not an animal. I saw a sentient, intelligent being of some type. A lot of people think that Bigfoot's an animal or some kind of relative Gigantopithecus, which lived about 60 to 100,000 years ago. I don't think it is. I often don't think it's one of the ancient hominids. I think what we have here is a creature that, and I've been leaning toward this theory for a while, and I think I'm either the first or one of the first people to espouse a theory, believe it or not, and I'm going to say it, people might disagree, of an interdimensional creature, or that was brought here by something or someone, probably 100,000 years ago and stayed here, but it's not stupid. It has family units. It knows how to avoid man. In fact, it knows man, and I'll tell you why I believe that. People have talked about it bending rifles. Have you ever seen a bear bend a rifle or a deer? No. They're not aware. They know it makes a loud noise. They don't know what it does, but a Bigfoot seems to know. And we've had reports of Sasquatch out west and in the Northwest bending rifles in half and things of this nature. But there are reports, like I said, of people seeing them coming out in and out of UFOs. Again, what begs the question, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. I've interviewed them. The people I've talked to were very credible, police officers as well. So that begs the question, what connection, what correlation could possibly be between UFOs and Bigfoot? I'm just going to touch on this briefly. That same area where the Bigfoot was sighted is not far from where my first wife and I and my two children had an encounter with a grounded UFO May 30th, 1990. That's all in the same area where these Bigfoot sightings are taking place. All this is within that same area of Bigfoot sightings. So there is some type of correlation. And I've talked to many people who have seen correlation where they've actually seen Bigfoot entering and leaving grounded craft. There's got to be some type of correlation. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I may have some people not like to hear what I have to say. Hope you don't mind, but I'm going to say this. Imagine, if you will, small aliens coming to this planet, say, 100,000 years ago. Tiny little 3 or 4 foot tall gray aliens, which just seem to be the more prevalent type. They look at an environment back then during the Pleistocene era when we had megaflora, megafauna like saber-tooth tigers, lions, giant ground sloth, you name it. All that existed back then. What was the climate like that back then? It was cold. Everything was gigantic. It was very heavily wooded. Early man was there. The giant cave bear was there up to 15 feet in height, which was the top predator at that time, used to prey on early man. The aliens came here and they wanted to do an exploration of this planet, but they were afraid to go out there amongst all these creatures. So what do you think they did? Maybe they had another race that they were familiar with that were intelligent. They could go in day and nighttime and search the land and be powerful enough to defend themselves and do what these alien creatures wanted them to do. Some of these giant creatures, which we call Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever name you want to call them, decided they don't like this planet. They decided to stay. And they broke off from their benefactors or things where they brought them here. I think that's a possibility because these creatures are intelligent. They are self-aware. Again, I'm going to hit this point. Bigfoot has been known to bend rifles in half. It knows human beings. It knows our weaponry. It knows it can be harmed by that weaponry. Regular animals don't do that. It knows human beings more so than I think that we know it. It knows how to avoid us. It's an expert at doing so. Its expertise lends us to the fact that it's in the woods. Any environment it can exist in. It's a top predator, apex predator. Anywhere it goes, it's the top of the line.
Now, he said a lot there, but I want to concentrate on this because we're getting into territory, in my opinion, and this is where I tend to go when it gets into this kind of stuff, right? You're talking about something that is not recognized to even exist, right? Most of us believe that it does because of the anecdotal experiences that people have shared, some of the evidence that's out there, but it's not proven. So you get into that territory where you're talking about something like Bigfoot that's not a proven species, and then you start espousing these other things that it could be and how it could have gotten here. So you're being very subjective and you're basically just giving your opinion on it, right? That's pretty much what all of this is. But I'll go to you first, Wayne, and talk a little bit about that. Have you heard a theory like that before, that Bigfoot is possibly something that aliens brought here? And how do you feel about explaining an enigma with a mystery wrapped in the unknown.
I think that's exactly what we're doing when we try to tie these two things together. I just don't know what to make of it, man. I'll go ahead and talk about what Dr. Lisa said, and we can compare what John said to this. Dr. Lisa Thompson, and this is just I could have shared a 10-minute clip, but it just time, considering time, I didn't want to do that, so I just broke it down. Dr. Lisa Thompson said the planet that they come from was called Maldek, Maldec. It was between Mars and Jupiter and is now the astro belt. They lived there with other human-like beings but like on Earth, they were very fear-based. They were constantly at war with each other and ended up destroying the planet. Sasquatch was able to relocate here. They are interdimensional. They hide from us because they view us similarly as the ones on their planet. That's a whole lot. That's a whole lot to ask someone like you, like me, like most people in here to accept. She claims to be able to communicate with these things, and they're the ones that told her. I can't dispute the woman. I don't know if if she's crazy. I don't think she is. Like I said earlier, she's extremely well spoken, very smart lady. She's a doctor. She's got a PhD. I forget what it's in, but she put the time in school and she got her degrees, and she's really intelligent. Where does she get something like this? I think when it comes to stuff like this, we have to, like all of it, you take in with I don't know, I don't really want to say any kind of mental deficiencies or anything like that. I'm not saying that by any means, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed anyway.
Chad, Bob, what do you guys say about it?
Bob, you go first.
If I saw Sasquatches, that's the way you say it plurally, Chad,
Sasquatch
is coming out of a UFO, I would obviously assume that they are with the aliens coming from another place or under the water, which I always love that theory. But what say you, Chad?
The question is, can we believe somebody who says they saw Sasquatches coming out of a UFO?
If you saw it, would you believe it?
If I saw it, I would.
Exactly. That's my point.
So you're saying the witnesses believe it, but we don't have anything other to go off of other than what they tell us, just like what Wayne just said, which is very fantastic and very hard to believe. Like you said, we give all of our interviewees the benefit of the doubt whenever we have them on the show. And a lot of claims are made, and oftentimes there's no evidence provided. I just don't know what to do with that, what Wayne just presented, for example.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And it comes down to whether you believe that person or not. Because I tell you, it's only happened to me a couple of times, and I've talked about it on Sasquatch Odyssey and even as a guest on another podcast. It's happened to me a couple of times where I've had people on and I've interviewed them, and they told me some of the weirdest stuff I've ever heard. One of them in particular, was the guy who claimed to have had sex with a female Sasquatch a while back on the show. And I struggled with putting that out there because it was so fantastical.
I choose to believe that, Wayne. I choose to believe.
It was so out there, right? And I put it out there, and I've met people since then at conferences, and I had tons of people come up to me and say, thank you so much for finally putting that out there. It's one of my favorite episodes of the show. The guy is completely batshit crazy, but I absolutely loved it. And I'm like, okay, there you go. There's the answer, right? Because the people let you know what they want. And I had this happen to me 2 days ago. Yesterday, actually, I interviewed a guy, and he's from Alabama, seemed like a good old country boy. He starts telling me his story, and it goes into this orb is there, and he and his buddy are seeing this orb, and he shines a laser pointer on this orb, and a Bigfoot materializes and then floats away and disappears. And I'm like, I told the dude, I was like, hey, man, I just got to be honest with you. People are going to think you're batshit crazy because that's a wild story. He's, I know, I got a video of it. You want me to see it? I'll send it to you. So he sends me the video, and I watched the video today. And here's the crux of the problem for me when it comes to some of this more fantastical stuff. The video is dark. All you can see is what looks like some sort of a light. It sounds like there's a television playing in the background, and They're not necessarily in the woods. I'm not so sure about this guy's story. I can look at that and say, I'll probably eventually put it out for everybody to listen to, because I put out Sex with the Sasquatch Dude. I can put out some crazy orb story in the woods and let people make up their own mind and take what they want and leave the rest. But I said that to say, I can look at that and say, this guy's probably, there were some other red flags with his storytelling and not recalling things and just body language and that kind of stuff that I picked up on, that maybe he was not remembering this exactly how the situation might have happened. I can take that with a grain of salt, but very much like what Wayne was talking about, when you have a PhD who's sitting down, we're talking the equivalent of sitting down and talking to Dr. Jeff Meldrum, right? You're sitting across the table interviewing a PhD, same credentials as Meldrum in most cases, right? Maybe not experience wise, and it may be in a different subject, but same equal playing field. And she's telling you some of the most fantastical stuff that you've ever heard. Do you think she's batshit crazy? Probably not, right? So if she believes it, then there has to be some grain of truth to it. Now, I'm not necessarily picking up what she's putting down, but again, I've had these weird situations where I'm around people. Ashley, who's in the chat, Ashley, I spent time with Ashley in the woods, and she and Todd are mind speaking with Bigfoot. I didn't have that experience, but that was their experience, and they've had it multiple times, and they certainly believe that it's happening. So what do you do with that? I can't look at Ashley, an intelligent young woman who I had a great time with in the woods for 7 days, and say, chick, I think you're crazy. No, I don't necessarily think that's the way to go, but at some point, I think we have to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to doing this kind of research, because fantastical stories are great, but does it really push the ball down the field when you just continuously talk about this enigma of Bigfoot wrapped in this other mystery, and then you're just adding these other layers of the unknown and the supernatural? I don't know. Go ahead.
You have something to play?
Yeah, go ahead though.
So I just wanted to add that the thing about Bigfoot and Sasquatch is that you've got so many people coming forward with encounters. And that's what sold it on us. Cops, military people, doctors, your average Joe truck driver, hunters. It spans the gamut, right? And so that is one of the reasons why, at least for me, I think you too, Bob, we started believing in Sasquatch. I personally have not had an encounter with a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, but I can't discount all those stories from all those people from all walks of life and call them all insane. There is a subset of those people who have also had the orb phenomenon occur either prior to or just after encountering a Bigfoot. And again, respectable people that you want to believe, why is it that they're seeing that stuff along with a Bigfoot, as you said, that we don't have any real evidence for other than we know what the evidence is at this point? So are those people to be discounted? Are we going to discount all the people that have had Sasquatch encounters, or are we only going to discount the people that have had Sasquatch encounters and seen orbs? So I'm struggling basically as I think about this issue, how to square that circle.
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. It's something that I've wrestled with since I got into the subject, because inevitably, if you stay in this long enough, and I don't know if it's in this clip, but I know Stan said it during my interview, if you investigate this long enough, you eventually move away from just the flesh and blood creature in the woods, banging on trees and making noises, and you inevitably run into people with these strange encounters that make you think twice about what you thought. At least it has been for me. I've always thought twice about it after having these conversations with sane people that look me in the eye and tell me their story, that are very sincere. And I've said it plenty of times on the show before, and this is, I think, what it really comes down to is, if they're having this experience, it's happening in one of a couple of ways. Either they're liars and they've totally made it up and none of it's true, or they're batshit crazy and none of it happened. They're just crazy. Or it happened in their mind. It did happen. They believe that it happened, but it only happened in their mind because there's something else on board. Or you do have the fact that you have to consider, ultimately, did it happen for real? Because who are we to say? Because I've had some really weird experiences in my life that I still can't explain to this day, including UFOs and other things in the woods. So I don't know. I'm going to play this clip from Stan Gordon, and then we can continue the conversation because Stan makes some good points here, and he talks about some interesting cases that he covered, including those that involve police officers.
Then you begin to get some really weird reports in over a period of time. People would tell us they're seeing a Bigfoot and watching this thing, and suddenly he would physically disappear and seconds later reappear at another location. I had a call from a police officer from up there along the ridge out around Lake Trovin area where sightings were prevalent and still go on. And the officer told me how this man that contacted them was very serious and very upset. He said it was a beautiful afternoon. He and his wife were taking a leisurely drive through that area when suddenly this huge hairy creature came across the road, walked out right in front of his vehicle. He slowed down, but he couldn't stop, and he hit it. And he said upon impact, it physically disappeared right in front of him. Those are the things that began to come to our attention. What is going on here? As time went on, things got much more unusual. We began to see a pattern. We would have a UFO sighting in a particular area, and then when minutes, hours, and days later, we'd have a Bigfoot sighting or vice versa. And then we would have cases, well-documented cases. Some of these you may have heard about. I've talked about them quite a bit, where you had a UFO and a Bigfoot seen together at the same time and place. As I'm talking about these cases, let me stress one thing. I am not suggesting that Bigfoot was riding around as a passenger in a spaceship from another planet or anything like that, because we don't know for sure what the UFO phenomenon actually is. We've had theories for years. As we get into this, I'll explain a little more detail about that to remind me to talk about that. But one of the cases was very interesting. In September of 73, north of Pittsburgh, you had two witnesses that saw a large, white, hairy Bigfoot running across the road towards the woods, but in one of its hands is carrying a luminous, small ball of light. As it ran to the woods a short time later, this object comes across the sky, projects the beam of light down into the woods where the creature ran into. And then things got much more unusual. The data that I'm seeing more and more in the cases I've been involved in, and now a lot of what I wrote about back in the 70s, in more recent years now, you're hearing more and more about this all across the country and out around the world. Other researchers are confirming a lot of what I was talking about years ago. It's going on more and more now. More and more people in the Bigfoot field are becoming a little more open-minded or were very skeptical years ago because they're hearing these reports too. One of the things that is becoming very common, back in the 60s, I started investigating reports of what I call mini UFOs. And they're really interesting because these things are not high in the sky. These are low to the ground. They come very close to people. The smallest ones are about 1 inch or 2 in diameter. They're like large, luminous, overgrown fireflies or lightning bugs, or depending where you're at the country. The majority of them, though, are about 1 foot or 2 in diameter, but there have been some reports of large ones, generally spherical objects. Now, some of these are just bright light sources of various colors, but others appear to be solid metallic. They're really interesting because, again, they become very close to people. I've had people, they can reach out their hands, get to touch them if they wanted to. I've had these things chase vehicles. I had them enter people's homes and cars through open windows where they floated around, went back out. I've had them inside of people's homes. We went right through the wall of the house. But what's really fascinating is in more recent years, and you probably have heard of this, there are many places around the country which have a long history of Bigfoot activity where Bigfoot research and others are seeing these strange small spheres of light low in the trees and coming low to the ground, in some cases coming up pretty close to some of the investigators.
So there we have it. There was Stan Gordon talking about some of the very similar things that we heard John talk about, who's been investigating this stuff for 50 years. Stan's been doing it for about the same amount of time. It over and over again, it's investigators seeing it, it's witnesses seeing it, and it's a history of having those types of sightings in the same place, sometimes at the same time. Stan and I talked at length about a 1973 to 74 flap that they had with tons of Bigfoot encounters and UFO encounters happening simultaneously. Sometimes it was landed craft where Bigfoot were seen coming and going from the same area, just all the things, right? So I don't know. I think, Bob, we talked a little bit before we got on. You and Chad, you mentioned that you might have a story that you had looked up that you might want to talk about. You want to get into that?
Yeah. So we did an episode 2 or 3 episodes ago called Alien Digest, and it was about this newsletter that was produced by an ex Air Force intelligence officer who went by the name Ron Rummel. He released 7 of these newsletters, and it was about supposed inside information about what's going on with aliens. And to give you an example of the kinds of topics that were in the newsletter was, for example, the alien agenda, common abduction and medical exam procedures, the secret wars, UFOs in history, and humanity's origin. And it went into the entire what are aliens doing? What is the alien agenda? What's our relationship to them? What's going on Earth? And what got me was that on Alien Agenda Volume 2, there was one that was called Hypnotist Unlocks the Bigfoot Alien Connection. Now, before I get into what was in that part of the newsletter, I just want to point out that Ron Rummel, and I'm reading this off of some of the websites and research that we did on this. He was an ex-Air Force intelligence agent and publisher of the Alien Digest, but he died on August 6, 1993. The digest was published in 1991. He allegedly shot himself in the mouth with a pistol in 1993, but his friends say that there was no blood found on the pistol barrel, and the handle of the weapon was free of fingerprints. In addition, the suicide note left by the deceased person was written by a left-handed person. Rummel was right-handed. Perspiration on the body smelled like sodium pentothal, which is both truth serum, but also what you would put in a cloth to knock somebody out. So the Alien Digest ran to 7 limited issues that are all now very hard to acquire. As a matter of fact, you can only find issues 1 through 4. So all that to say, there's strangeness around the death of this guy, Ron Rummel, ex-Air Force intelligence officer, who took it upon himself to publish this newsletter that he called Alien Digest. In that volume 2, again, Hypnotist Unlocks Bigfoot Alien Connection, he writes, in December of 1977, I was present when a man was placed under hypnosis. A question was placed to the young man as to what the aliens were up to in the world. At first, he drifted to the southwestern coast of Africa, and this is what he said. I see Bigfoot creatures coming out of a cave. The cave has a redness to it down in the tunnel. There is a saucer on 4 legs sitting on the ground next to a tree, the only tree around. The Bigfoot creatures are coming out of the cave with large metal boxes and large round canisters. They're stacking these boxes and canisters next to the tree. Men are now coming down steps from the saucer. The Bigfoot creatures start to move around. These are not men. These are small, big-headed beings. These big heads are telling the creatures to open one of the canisters for some kind of an inspection. One Bigfoot creature is opening the top of one of the canisters. It's a dark red, blood-like liquid with purple specks. There are what also appear to be tiny specks of bones. The 3 Bigfoot creatures and the small big heads are turned away from the smell. The aliens were afraid of some kind of mix-up and did not want to carry toxic compounds. They seem to be thinking that this is human waste of some sort. The faces on these aliens are very unfriendly and mean-looking. They tell the Bigfoot creatures to load the metal boxes and canisters on the flying saucer. Now we are taking off. The hypnotist asks, are you traveling on the saucer? And he says, yes, I am. We are already in space, and it has been just seconds. I can see a big window that these aliens are looking out of. And eventually he talks about how there's a Bigfoot creature locked in a big chair with electronic devices all over him, and he's mad, but there is nothing he can do about it. One alien is telling the other one to shut the door. I now seem to be drifting to the top of this craft, and he goes on to talk about what's going on in this craft. But bottom line is, in this newsletter that was all about Alien Agenda and all this stuff, there are these Bigfoot creatures that are performing tasks for the big heads, which, as you can imagine, is probably the Greys, right? The classic Greys. I don't know what to say about this. The strange circumstances around the death of the guy who wrote these newsletters after publishing 8, 3 of which nobody can find anymore. What say you?
I'll say hey to John. He just said we need to interview Stan Gordon. Yeah, you probably missed that, John. I did interview Stan a couple of years ago. I played a little bit of that interview on here. And you're right. He has investigated tons of those things. But back to what you were saying there, Chad, I don't know, man. Again, it's one of those things that this is coming back through.
It's all hearsay.
Right. Plenty of people will say he was under hypnosis. It was something that was planted. It was suggested. Those kind of things. John could probably talk to that. He can hypnotize people and do that kind of stuff. So, but again, it's one of those things where no matter what you do or what you say, somebody's got an answer for it, right? It's one of those things where if you're the one explaining the enigma with the mystery, then you've got your answers. And then people like myself who tend to be more of a flesh and blood, it's more of an ape in the woods kind of thing. I tend to explain away some of the wilder things. And again, I just no.
I do want to say, because Bob and I have been diving into the whole alien agenda and the disclosure stuff that seems to be going on right now. If you've been paying at all attention to that with David Grush and et cetera, and the talking heads of the UFO community like Elizondo and Coldheart and so on and so forth, when they're asked, what is the nature of what you are hearing in the community, meaning the government and the people that know about what's happening? And they use words like, it's sobering. In other words, the truth about aliens is sobering. It challenges our understanding of our own nature of being, our own connection with what we consider to be God and the universe. And that it may not be benevolent, that it could be malevolent. And there have been hints towards the possibility that humans are a giant petri dish on this place called Earth, and that we have been manipulated from the beginning. Now, again, this is all theory and conjecture and fantastic stories, but let's just say that we were basically created by these aliens as a giant petri dish. Is it possible that the Sasquatch were also created as part of this giant petri dish, perhaps before us? And one of the things that these talking heads in the UFO community have been talking about is that when they're done with this grand experiment, they will hit the reset button, which would obviously be very bad for us. Did they do this previously with the Sasquatch, hit that reset button, but not all of them perished, and therefore you have some in the woods that we see occasionally, but are obviously not hugely populous? I'm just throwing it out there, man. I know, again, this is all conjecture.
Thanks so much for muddying the water. It wasn't muddy.
You're welcome.
When you started talking about all of that stuff. Wayne, I don't know if you want to weigh in on any of this stuff before we go to the phones, but I do want to open this up for you guys who are in the chat and watching this live. If you want to call in and ask a question or give us your comment, we want to hear from you. We want you to be a part of the show. So, Wayne, do you have anything to add to that before we turn it over to the people?
Yeah, just real quick. I am excited about opening the phones up. I'm just curious how people made the connection between orbs and Bigfoot. You had the gentleman that you played, Stan Gordon, talking about, he was describing them as low-flying aircrafts and different sizes and being spherical. Those are orbs. That's what I was thinking while he was saying that. How do people start making the connection? Because the gentleman on there, I forget his name, made the very good point that you see or you hear of orbs indoors in hotels, in your home and stuff. Is that connected to Bigfoot as well? Or one of the few things I have not experienced Bigfoot related, but is it Bigfoot related? I don't know. I want to throw that out there. We don't need to dive into it if you don't want to. I do think we need to open the phones up.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and that may be something that somebody wants to call in and talk about is I've heard that in so many cases with people who have had Bigfoot activity on their property, near their property, or had experiences, and then they come into the house and they start having these orb experiences, and they draw that correlation, whether it's there or not. Maybe it's just one of those things that is mutually exclusive, but for those people, it's a very real thing, and they believe for whatever reason that it is connected. Tiffany, have you heard anything about orbs and Bigfoot? What say you on the orbs and Bigfoot connection?
Oh, I'm not sure about the connection, but as you say, this is a whole shit ton to unpack, right? Like, why do some people experience the Bigfoot and the UFOs, and then some people experience them separately? Bob and Chad had a guest on their show. I don't remember the number, but his name was Luke, and he's from England, I think. Massive UFO stuff, but no Bigfoot. But it was UFOs and paranormal, but no Bigfoot. And if Bigfoot is going to be tied to UFOs and orbs, which I think they're separate, in my opinion, when are they going to start saying, okay, Dogman came from a UFO too? It just opens up so
Or have
many.
they are, or are they already saying that? I haven't heard it.
Right, I haven't heard it either. And the research that I did when I was doing Dogman Terror in the Woods, I didn't see anything about Dogman and UFOs.
Who's to say they're not hitching a ride? So we want to hear from you guys. Obviously, the chat's going, but I'm going to open up the phone lines. If anybody wants to call in, now's the time, 828-394-9191. I am standing by to take your call. And what say you? If you're into this subject and you have an opinion on it, we'd like to hear from you. Again, I've said it so many times with Bigfoot. I don't think anybody knows anything about Bigfoot, really. A lot of people claim to know a lot of things, but when you start talking about anything in definitives when it comes to this stuff, whether it's UFOs or involvement with Bigfoot, whatever the case may be, I tend to turn off because I don't really think so. Unless you've had an experience and it is your experience, then you can talk definitively about your experience. But the people who come on and say, oh, yes, I absolutely know that they're aliens and they were dropped off here and it's this, that, or the other. That's really all I've ever heard when it comes to people addressing it. And I just don't believe that for a second, because the second thing is I always go to, how do you know that? That's the question I had for you, Wayne, when you were talking about the lady earlier. Is I was already writing it down as you were talking, and you did finally circle back around and say she communicates with these things, right? She talks to them. So she has that connection. So if they're telling her, then that's how she figured it out. But I think in so many ways, the mind speak, which we've talked about on the show before, the telepathic communication with Bigfoot, that's a whole nother thing. And I've said it before, I haven't had that experience, but I know people personally who have. I've talked to people on the show who have. And if you're having that experience, some people say it can be an ape in the woods, and that can happen as well. Maybe they just have that ability, like some humans have abilities far beyond what others have as far as capabilities. But it's made me wonder if that is something that I'm missing. Have I missed the boat on this telepathic communication and mind speak and just written it off? And if I have, would that explain more so that they might be aliens, right? Because that sort of speaks to, as I've been talking, we've had 3 people call, so I'm going to call now. I'm going to call back to Washington, PA, and have a conversation with our first caller. How about that?
Awesome.
Hello.
Hey, man, it's Brian. You're on the air with us. What's going on?
Oh, I just wanted to call and make a couple comments about what Wayne has said about forest publicity, so to speak, with Todd Standing. Okay. There's 2 types of good information. One is bad information. One is good information. And when I first started doing this stuff so many years ago, as I told you a long time ago, we didn't have the type of people that we do nowadays. We didn't have the amount of interest in Bigfoot or UFOs or anything for that matter. Because first, frankly, we had a lot of nuts out then, and we had a lot of hoaxers and cultists and everything else. So it hurt the field in general and hurt people from coming out and actively participating and looking for things like this, okay? But so now this notwithstanding, yeah, I know you had mentioned about being on parole and all that as far as when he committed a hoax 12 years ago or whatever it was. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, he has a long way to prove himself to me, first of all. Your veracity, I never doubted. But as far as getting any kind of positive out of this by hoaxing stuff, people who are interested in this field don't generally, they listen to your podcast and other podcasts. And if they're interested and they hear about somebody who's been hoaxing stuff, I don't care how long ago it was, they're going to lose interest in it. Okay. We need positive stuff, not negative stuff. Okay. That's what could generate and garner more interest and a more serious investigation and, frankly, the scientific community to do these things. Okay. But you went up to British Columbia. I got that. I know you heard what you heard, saw what you heard. I saw what you saw. I never doubt you. Okay. But for myself personally, as I said earlier, he has a long way to go to prove himself with me. Now, if I could go up there myself and do some of the things that I know, okay, that'd be a different story. But until he has to prove himself to me personally, and that's just my opinion. Now, I'm not saying there's not Bigfoot in British Columbia. I'm pretty sure there is. He may well have had genuine experiences of stuff. And he may well have put a lot of time and effort into the field, even with that $10,000 drone you were talking about. I got that. That's a lot of time and investment into it. But I know for a fact that in my experiences, I've had 3 Bigfoot sightings and I've had multiple UFO sightings. And I can tell you this, most of the stuff I've seen has been purely by accident. No matter how much equipment I had with me or the personnel that was with me or the time of day or the area, I didn't see anything for the longest time until it was by accident. And it's nice to have the drones. And I agree with you, by the way, Brian. I don't think the drone technology is the be all know all about this stuff. I think it's going to require a lot more effort than just that. I think that can be a part of the process, but not the total process. I do know that drones can move faster in certain areas than human beings can and cover a wider space. I got that too. But basically, bottom line, you need boots on the ground. And you need people who are serious about this kind of stuff. I was just talking to my wife. We were on a drive when I was watching your show and stuff. We just came from the ridge, actually, where I told you about the Bigfoot stuff. And we were coming back, and I'm listening to all this. And there's been a lot of groups out there. Like I'm not going to mention any particular group, okay? But I'm just going to say this. You have groups out there of guys that are out there in the middle of the night, half drunk, carrying guns and flashlights, looking like they're from the backwoods somewhere, trying to hunt down and catch a Bigfoot. Now, if I was interested in doing this kind of stuff as a layperson, and I would see something like that on TV or listen to their podcast, I'd be scared to death to go out in the woods for being shot by accident by this type of people. For reals.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
And I've been in the woods when I used to deer hunt. Okay, I've been in the woods wearing blaze orange and shot at, against a white snow background. People were shot at me. I'm clearly a human being, let alone in the middle of the night, somebody's coming onto my property, and I go out to investigate the noise, and I'm quiet to see who it is, and somebody just shoots at me thinking I'm a Bigfoot. So that'll dissuade people who are really interested in doing this kind of stuff. This is why it's been so hard for people to get off the ground and get the type of financial support and scientific community to support them as well, because there's so much of the nonsense that's going on. I'm not saying that Mr. Standing isn't now genuine. I don't know him. You met him, you talked with him, you spent time with him. I did not. I only know by what I see and what I hear on these podcasts and, from others as well. Okay. I do know there's a lot of hoaxers out there. There's a lot of people that want their 15 minutes of fame for whatever reason. Okay.
And that's one of the reasons we started this show. And this is John, by the way. We didn't catch John's name in the beginning. This is John. And I don't want to cut you off, but we have other people that are waiting, so I want to get back to them, John. I appreciate your comments. I agree with you. We'll certainly have more conversations, I'm sure, about Todd in the future. And I agree with you on he's got a long way to go. He's made the bed that he's laying in, and
can I ask John a quick question though before we jump in?
Before you cut me off here.
Yeah, hang on, John. Hang on. Chad's got a question for you. Hold tight.
John, I got a question for you. You said you had Bigfoot encounters and UFO encounters. Were they close to each other? Were they related, or were they completely distinct?
I can't hear him.
He asked about your encounters being close to each other, whether it was Bigfoot and or UFOs, and were they close to each other, or were they clearly, distinctly different from each other?
I've seen Bigfoot 3 times. I got within a 15 foot of a 10 foot tall one And when I did that, I was actually coming back from another Bigfoot investigation about 20 miles away. And there were 12 police officers and 30 civilians who saw it even before I got there. So there were 42 people who actually saw this creature before I even got there. And they refused to walk up to where I was, leaning against the high tension towers. I told this in one of my interviews with you. But it was 10 feet tall. And the reason I know it because I measured its height when it left against the high tension tower. I'm 6
there was a UFO.
It made me look like a peanut. Now, in the close proximity to that, there were a lot of UFO sightings as well. I've investigated thousands of cases. And out of those thousands of cases, I would have to say probably maybe 120 to 150 people claim to have seen Bigfoot in close proximity to a landed or hovering UFO, or actually going into or coming out of a landed UFO. So there's a connection here of some type. I will tell you personally, from getting as close as I did to that big one, okay, that it's not an animal. It is sentient, it is self-aware, it is highly intelligent, okay? It's not, and the drawings I've seen of these creatures that people put on Facebook and stuff, they don't look like a muscular, gigantic ape with a bare chest and muscles. No, they're covered in hair, okay, except for their face and the ends of their hands. Yeah. Now, I could go on and on if I could.
I know,
You know,
and
like-
we appreciate it, man. I definitely appreciate it. We'll certainly have to get you back on the show and give you some more time at some point, but I am going to cut you off there and go to another caller here in a second. But I think that answered your question, Chad. His experiences were mutually exclusive. He had Bigfoot experiences, and he talked to a lot of people who had those experiences together, but they weren't at the same time. I'm going to see if I can go to Nashville here and get this person on the line. I'm having to call him back. We're just flying by the seat of our pants here tonight. So everybody's going to have Brian's personal cell phone. Hey, this is Brian. You're live on the air with us, man. What's going on? What's your first name and where are you from? Can you hear me?
He's who dis?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, give us your first name and where you're from. You're on the air with us, man.
Oh, this is Matt, Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Awesome, man. We love Tennessee. What's going on, Matthew? What's your question or what's your comment?
One of the comments I have is on one of the episodes you had when you went with Todd Standing. He had spoke about keeping our bodies clean. Also talks about the pineal glands and all that. And I want to know your thoughts about it. I have my own, but I want to know your thoughts about it because it really seems very, from my studies, that's very magical. That's very Egyptian. It's very your third eye, all that kind of thing. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay. And I'll tell you, I'm going to go hang up and let you listen there because I'm going to go to another caller when I finish it, but I'm going to answer your question for you. I appreciate you calling in and taking the time to be a part of the show, man. I appreciate it.
All right.
So clearly people want to talk about Todd tonight and not Bigfoot and UFOs. So I'll answer the question. I think there's something to that, right? I've talked about the grounding and other things that are just a natural thing outside of Bigfoot. You take that away, you go out into nature. Grounding is a thing. It's scientifically proven. You take your shoes off and you walk around in nature. It changes your body. It changes the way you feel. There's an energy there. And I think certainly with the pineal gland and eating good food, just in general, eating good food that's sourced properly and keeping your body clean. He didn't mean like physically taking a shower. He meant like a clean food, not a whole lot of alcohol, drugs, those kind of
Say
things.
what?
Yeah, no, it's tough. The Basement Hangout would be canceled because you can't.
Yeah,
you can't
dang,
drink
Chad.
food.
Alcohol and bacon cheeseburgers keep us healthy, man. I don't know.
That's why you haven't had a sighting.
So, short answer to the question is, yeah, I think it's a thing. I don't necessarily know if doing those things is something that has to do with Bigfoot. So I don't know that, but as I'm finishing that up, I'm going to go to another caller here and get Jake on the line and see what Jake's got to say. I clearly our setup is not working that they're able to hear you guys. Jake, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, what's going on? You all right?
I'm good. You're live on the air with us. Tell us where you're from, Jake, and then go ahead with your question or your comment.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Jake. I'm from Michigan. Brian, thanks for calling me back. Hope everything's going well. Gotta say, I love the show. Hello to everybody there listening as well. I just think it's an incredible the relevance of this topic, only because I know I've been talking to you on and off for a little while about some things I got coming up. And literally just last week, I had a retired, I can't name his name just with things going on, but I have a retired Michigan DNR officer, so Department of Natural Resources, contacted me trying to share his story. He claims to have not only multiple sightings, but possibly a habituation site going on with Bigfoot in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan right now. What ties this all together, and it's hard for me to even try to rationalize a connection between UFOs and Bigfoot in my mind. I don't think there's one there. But all the stories you've shared tonight, the different clips, and then this guy's story saying, hey, not only do I have this going on with Bigfoot, I also had a UFO sighting last week, and it hovered around the woods on my property. It stood there for about, I think he said 5 to 6 minutes. He was just watching this thing at all. And it's the first one he's ever had in his life. So immediately to me, I'm like, wow, that's pretty incredible. And then when I saw you post the topic for tonight, I'm like, okay, this is odd that this is being brought up at this time.
It's definitely serendipitous, isn't it? I say it all the time, man. I used to think that this stuff was completely separate and not connected at all, but now I feel like there's some sort of connection, and that's what we're trying to figure out. But I appreciate you sharing that, man. I look forward to talking to you. I know we're gonna hopefully work together on some of your projects in the future, so we'll stay in touch. And I'm gonna let you go and get to another caller, man. But I really appreciate you taking time to call in and talk to us.
Hey, I just want to tell Jim Doherty from Facebook, who said the Basement Boys need to go to Burger King, I think. We don't go to Burger King, my man. We grill our own burgers over here at the Hangout.
The burger, the burgers come directly from the Hangout. So
that's correct.
From the grill.
Right.
Thanks for thinking of us.
I'm going after another caller here. Y'all hold tight. Isn't this fun?
Yes, it is. Actually.
This is nice. You get to hear the call. And
I like it. Yeah. Like old school radio.
Hello.
Hey, man, you're on the air with us. Tell us your first name and where you're from.
Pat, North Georgia.
What's going on, Pat? What's your question or comment, man?
What's up? I want to say hey to the Basement Hangout guys. What's up, guys? You guys are
Hey.
Yo.
Hey,
I know
buddy.
you can't hear us, but yes, we love you for shouting out.
Yes, unfortunately, my setup's not working. You can't hear them, Pat, but they can hear you. They said hello.
That's cool. I look forward to checking out their channel. They seem like interesting, level-headed guys.
But it's okay.
And yeah, so I'm not here to talk about Todd Standing, first of all. Yeah. Let's talk about Bigfoot and aliens, which is your subject. So one thing I wanted to let, if I may opine for a minute and then maybe ask a question. One thing that is, when you get to the anecdote part of things, like to me, it's a narrative, it's stories. And when people go on shows, they tell stories, and stories are entertainment. So there's not a bastion of scientific rigor going on. So when people start making pretty hardcore claims about Bigfoot's getting in and out of a spaceship, that's getting out of bounds with our understanding of the world. So I think it's okay to question that pretty heavily. And it shouldn't just be accepted as some kind of truth. So at the end of the day, how do we move the ball down the field in trying to get any kind of evidence, correlations between these two very strange things? Neither one of them very well understood. If there's a lot of eyewitness anecdote, why are we not getting better evidence? Why, especially today, pretty amazing observations. The one guy said there was 30 people and 12 police officers. And as Brian, police officers are just flooded with cameras. Where's the evidence?
That's a good question, man. And I'm going to let you go there and we're going to answer it real quick. But I will definitely get with you on the side. We'll continue this conversation, man. I really appreciate you calling in and being a part of the show. We thank you much. So that's one of the questions that we're planning on answering. I'm actually putting that, there's an entire chapter in my book about evidence and what evidence actually is, and then what kind of evidence exists out there in the world, particularly for Bigfoot. Obviously, the book is about Bigfoot. It's not about aliens or anything else. It is strictly about Sasquatch. So that begs the question, it happens all the time, whether you remove the UFO part of this or just the Bigfoot, whatever the case may be. You can remove both, interchange them however you'd like. There's always a lack of evidence, right? It really comes down to that. There is a ton of anecdote out there. My entire show, Sasquatch Odyssey and Wayne's Paranormal Odyssey, and a lot of the Basement Hangout is about anecdotal stories that people come on and share, whether it's Bigfoot, Dogman, UFOs, whatever the case may be. And that is evidence. There's plenty of people out there who will tell you that eyewitness accounts are not evidence. They are. If you don't believe that eyewitness accounts are evidence, go into a courtroom and watch 4 cases throughout the day in your local county courtroom and see how many eyewitnesses come up and talk about who they saw rob a bank or who they saw beat a woman up or whatever the case may be. There are people that are convicted on that. We won't get into that, but I'll go around the horn and give you guys the last word on this. Wayne, how do you feel about just the evidence in general, whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, very similar to what Pat said? I don't necessarily think we should be just giving credence and taking this stuff as the gospel. But if you're like me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you have to consider it, right? As part of the overall situation.
There's one thing about what Pat said that I would definitely agree on is with today's technology, everything that we have, cameras everywhere. We all have a camera in our pocket on our phones. Pretty damn good cameras anyway. And there should be, you would think that there would be more evidence. And then you hear people talk about why. I can certainly speak to the one time that I had a chance to gather evidence in the woods and I was too afraid. I didn't even think to pull my camera out. But that happened one time. I would like to think if that ever happens again, I'll be ready. So I do understand that. There should be more picture evidence out there. But to discount eyewitnesses, to people to say that believe people when they tell you that they have seen something, you can't do that. You just can't do that. You have to take people at their word. There's always going to be a reason why they didn't get a picture, why they didn't get a. Yeah, that's how I feel.
I agree, man. In the meantime, we had a caller. I'm going to see if I can get this caller back on. I'm having a good time with the phone
Yeah, the
calls.
more callers we can get, the better, man.
We were trying to stop at 8:00, but I'm just going to keep calling.
Hey, callers are awesome.
Hey, this is Brian. You're live on the air with us. You might want to
Turn your radio down.
Yeah, whatever you're watching us on, cut that down while we're talking on the phone for a second.
I got you.
There you go. It's like, I feel like you should say, long-time listener, first-time caller. So
there you go.
Give us your first name and where you're from, man, and then go ahead with your question or comment.
Mike from Kentucky.
What's up, Mike? Long time no talk, man.
Well, I left you a message on the call in. I didn't even mean to call in tonight, man. I was just going to listen and enjoy this, but you guys are taking me down another place with this stuff. And
tell us where we're taking you, Mike.
I want to phrase this in the form of a question. Okay, so I've had some experiences, been on your show a couple times. When the guy talked about his habituation site, I've got a spot where I lay some rocks out and leave some stuff sometimes, and I'll go back every month or so, and the rocks will be in a pattern and the stuff will be gone. And we talked about, I think they leave me some glyphs and some artwork with their stick structures. Then I showed you, we talked about my property, and I think I sent you, I overloaded you on pictures and stuff after that the other night, but there's an orb picture in some of the stuff I sent you. And so I've seen orbs and doing paranormal stuff, and not too long ago on my property, I saw a couple, and they would go down the back. I can look out my bedroom window at night, see out on my 5 acres, and the dogs would even notice them and run them down the fence. I started getting glyphs and stuff on my property. And I honestly, man, I started looking into fairies and things because I didn't know what could be doing this. And it wasn't until my mother-in-law was here a couple weeks ago, and she went around the end of the house. And she said, came back in and she said, "Did you make that big X at the end of the house?" I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "That big stick X." And I said, "Oh, I had seen it and I just left it there." I said, "No, I didn't make it." What would do that? That's done on purpose. And so now I'm wondering, I'm just going to phrase this in the form of a question. Could the ones I'm interacting with, or I think I'm interacting with 30 miles away, turn themselves into an orb and come to my property and leave me stuff?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to hang up, Mike, and we're going to answer the question. I appreciate you being a part of the show, man. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. See you.
So that's a good question. I've had people tell me that. I've had people tell me stories, and Daryl comes to mind. I believe it was Daryl Denton from Tennessee, Wayne, who told me he was in a situation where he was out investigating Bigfoot, and he saw these orbs floating up the hill where these guys were, and this freaking orb turned into a possum in front of him. And he said before he said it, he said, "I know you're going to think I'm crazy." And Daryl is a stone cold sober dude. Like, he is no nonsense. And he knew how crazy that sounded before he told me. So he prepared me for it. And he tells me this story about this orb turning into a frickin' possum on a Bigfoot expedition. What do you do with that, Chad, Bob? What do you guys do with that? Where do we go from here when orbs are following people home and turning into possums?
Bob,
Yeah,
it's all you, man.
It's crazy. But if I saw it, I may believe it. That's my whole point. So if I'm the experiencer, I'm going to be a believer. So like we've been saying, evidence is what people see. They tell us. I don't know. If I saw it, I have no freaking clue.
You said he's stone cold, man. Sober. I believe him.
You got to
this
drink a
guy's
lot
a
to see
pillar.
an orb turn into a possum.
Correct.
Yeah, this guy's a pillar of his community, right? He's not just some Joe Schmo that's sitting on the porch smoking weed and hallucinating, which we know that's not the case because I just did a show about that on Sasquatch Odyssey. But here's this guy having this experience, and he has no reason to even tell me that experience. It was just part of his experience that he was not going to leave out, thankfully, because it's data. It's part of what he experienced while he was out in a site where people were having.
So there's only 3 options. He had a mental break, which doesn't sound likely. He is crazy to begin with. Sorry to use that pejorative word, which based on what you're telling me doesn't sound, or whatever he saw was manifesting in reality, at least to make him believe that. And again, we go back to the nature of these encounters are beyond our understanding of what we think our reality is. We can't put our hands around it, but there's something stranger going on in this world than what we see on TV and what we accept as a standard society. We just go back and forth to work, this and that and the other thing.
Yeah, we're beyond that.
So you telling me that this guy, he's to be believed? I believe him. It's just what it is. We give everybody the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, that's really what it ultimately boils down to. I don't think we're going to solve this mystery here tonight, but
yes, we are. We're not going to end this. We're going to keep taking calls until we figure this out.
Until the mystery is solved. Is there anybody else out there who has? We don't have any callers in line, so
I'm going to call in myself. I'm enjoying it so much.
So I had a point. So what you read, Chad, was big heads, which we were saying are aliens.
Aliens, yes.
Having Bigfoot move items around.
Correct.
And there was a Bigfoot on a craft chained down.
Yes.
So could it be that aliens enslaved the Bigfoot and made them do tasks for them?
It could be, yes.
That's insane.
I choose to believe that's what happened.
That's what it sounds like they were doing. But
it's a whole nother show that we'll have to do some other time.
Yeah, that's
Wayne, Tiffany, do you have any final words on any of that stuff? Does the orbs and the Bigfoot or the aliens, what say you on all of that craziness?
Well, it makes me wonder, right? If he saw an orb and it landed and then turned into a possum, you have to, again, it's a big ask, but you look at the credibility of the witness. Why are they going to BS you? What is their motive for BSing you? So you have an orb, let's just hypothetically speak, 100% for certain that happened. Does that mean that these orbs that are floating around could possibly be the Bigfoot? Like shape-shifting and all of that? I don't know.
It definitely could be. I don't know.
Someone's agreeing that the Bigfoot were enslaved by the
Yes.
aliens. Someone in the chat. Thank you for whoever that was.
Yes. They said they agreed with Chad and Bob. That's the first time that has ever happened, ladies and gentlemen. So.
All we needed was one concurrence, and now it is true.
I think that's a good place to end. I can't thank everybody in the chat enough for being here and being involved. Everybody who picked up the phone and called in, we definitely appreciate you being a part of the show. If you want to hear the rest of the episodes for That Bigfoot Podcast, you can get them anywhere you listen to podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you want to check out the Basement Hangout, go check out the Basement Hangout. Chad and Bob have quite a library of shows that you can go and get caught up on. They have some amazing people. They've had some great guests like me over there. Yeah, other people have been on there talking about Bigfoot. So go check out the Basement Hangout anywhere you get your podcast. And of course, check out Paranormal Odyssey. Wayne and Tiffany do a fantastic job with that show every single week. They bring you all kinds of amazing content. And we'd love to have you. Eventually, we're probably going to put some of these back catalogs and some extra stuff over here for you guys on YouTube from That Bigfoot Podcast. We've got tons of other stuff coming out. more episodes every single Friday, and we're going to do more of these live. So it's a tradition on our show. We don't go around and do the things that Chad and Bob do and make you say stupid shit at the end of the show like they made me
Say
say.
what? They're words of wisdom for
Words of
life.
wisdom.
Oh yeah, I'm
man,
sorry.
come on.
It's words of wisdom. I had it written down. I should.
Sale of underwear at Costco this week, man. Come on.
But I do give Wayne the final word on the show. So Wayne, you get the final word, man. And I do have an outro for everybody who didn't get an outro last time. I did put together an outro, and it's a cool ass song. So you guys stick around for the outro. There's a delay, so Wayne will talk in about 10 minutes.
All right, guys. Yeah, again, we appreciate everybody hanging out tonight. Thank you for everyone that called in. We appreciate it. Look forward to spending more time with you guys. But until then, y'all be good to yourselves, be good to each other. We'll see you next time.